All of my love, my peace and happiness, I'm gonna give it to Delta.
All right, we will now move to board and superintendent comments, and I'm going to do this a little differently this evening. I'm going to go first. So tonight I'm going to choose to tell you a little story. I want you to remember these numbers, 1, 2, and 3. Keep those in mind as we go along. So most of us growing up had superheroes that we looked up to or people that we looked up to for inspiration. I was fortunate enough to have 2 of those. On April 7th, one of those was gone. My mother, Annie Ruth Brown Mathews. She was an educator here in Huntsville City Schools. So this is where the story is going to begin. I'm going to tell you about it a little bit. So she was a graduate from Alabama A&M University. She graduated in education. She had every certificate or degree that you could possibly get in education at that time. Of course, she graduated in a time where she was teaching in segregated school systems. She was a member of Delta Sigma Theta, and at that time, that sorority was full of educators. Now, in 1970, towards the part in her career, she taught at Council High School. That was the final year of Council High School before integration happened. And she was the very first. We hear the stories of Sonny Herford and so forth, but we don't hear the stories of the educators. She was the first to integrate Huntsville High School in 1970. She was the very first. So this is where the story begins. So being fresh out of integration, coming in, working in Huntsville High School in a very new environment, she had a student in her classroom that refused to do their work. Just wouldn't turn in homework, wouldn't go to class, and so forth. So she determined that she was going to fail that student. Any teacher, that's pretty much what you do. If you're not going to do the work, you're going to fail that student. So, of course, there was a parent-teacher conference. It just so happened that that parent was the superintendent of Huntsville City Schools at that time. So Miss Mathews decided to tell the principal that she wanted to have this conference. And the principal kind of asked, do you really want to have that conference? Because he knew who the parent of that child was. She said yes. So they had the parent-teacher conference. The day came along for him to come into the school. Of course, everybody was on pins and needles. The superintendent was coming to the school to talk about his son. So he comes to the classroom with the principal and is brought to the classroom, and being the strict educator that she was, she started to tell him before he walked in and said anything what his son was doing or not doing. He sat there and listened. The principal, of course, kind of shook a little bit that she's telling him what to do here, what's going on. Well, at the end of the conversation, because he got no words in, when she finally asked him, so what do you have about to say about the subject? Because I'm going to fail your son because he's not doing the work. And he said, I just wanted to see the woman that was willing to fail the superintendent's son, period, point blank. That's why he came. No other reason but to see who would be the person that would have the audacity to fail that student. Of course, he did fail. She meant what she said. He did fail. But that was her story of coming into the school system, of coming from segregation to teaching the school system. And she was one of 3 African-American teachers in Huntsville High School up until about 1999, 95. So things changed over time. And one of the things that she did when she wanted to go into education, she had the forethought that she wanted to see change. She had no clue how that was going to happen, but she wanted to see change. So the numbers that I gave you, 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to give them to you what they mean. On May 1st, 1875, Alabama A&M University was created for educators to be education and many other things. She was born May 2nd, 1938, destined to go to Alabama A&M to teach and become an educator. May 3rd, 2020, we talk about the desegregation order, the green factor of staffing for Huntsville City Schools. I can't write a better ending to any story than what I just told you. Now, in her honor, what I'm going to do, like I said, she was a member of Delta Sigma Theta, and she had this with her for 40 years. I was never allowed to touch it. I'm touching it tonight. And I will leave this as I step away from my seat this evening. This is the last yearbook from Council High School before desegregation happened, before she moved into Huntsville City Schools. And as I step away in her honor, I'm going to let the meeting continue with This My Place, and Ms. Watkins will continue.